Hi and welcome. My name is Charlie Bahadja and I am 9 years old. This year I get to receive a very special gift from God. I'm preparing to make my first Holy Communion. I'm so excited and have so many questions to ask. I'm sure you do too. Lucky for me, Father Jack has decided to come and help me with some of the questions I have to ask. So come along with me as we find out more about our first Holy Communion. Hi Father Jack, thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Charlie. Hello, everyone.
Father, what should I make my first Holy Communion?
First Holy Communion, sometimes we can think of it like a nice chance to have a party, but it's something much deeper than that, something much more important. This is the first time we really received Jesus Christ himself in Holy Communion. And it's our step deeper into his life and the life of his church. So it's a really important, deep moment in our faith.
Thanks, Father Jack. How do we prepare?
There's a few things we can do to prepare for First Holy Communion. One of them is obviously the classes that we attend in our parish. This is a very important way to prepare for this First Holy Communion. But the second way is prayer. And we do this in our own personal prayer, but also by attending Mass beforehand. So we understand what's happening at Mass, we get used to what we do at Mass, and this is another way of prayerful preparation. And the third one is during those classes, we'll often have a practice, a run through of what will happen on the day. And these, I think, are three good ways to prepare for this First Holy Communion.
So why is receiving my first Holy Communion so important?
First Holy Communion's so important because this is our first reception of really Jesus Christ himself. And it's our entry more deeply into his life and the life of his church. So it unites us with Jesus that little bit more and unites us with his whole church. And that's why we prepare for this. And that's why we have classes for this. It's a really important step in our faith. A little bit deeper into the life of Jesus and his church.
So how does the bread become Jesus and how does the wine become his blood?
It all happens at that moment in Mass where the priest repeats the very same words that Jesus used on the night of the Last Supper when he made the bread and the wine his body and blood. The priests repeat those very same words because it really becomes Jesus, his body and blood. Otherwise, we wouldn't need classes, right? You don't need classes to eat your toast in the morning.
Do I have to dress up?
Well, we dress up for lots of things, right? Weddings, parties. Now, First Holy Communion is just as important, if not more important than these occasions. So when we dress up for these things, we dress up for First Holy Communion too. So it's good to look smart on your First Holy Communion day.
Okay. When the bread becomes Jesus, what will it taste like?
Well, not too dissimilar from ordinary bread. There's no surprises in how it tastes.
So what will happen if I forget to say or I forget to do something?
Well, don't worry too much because you have your priest there and your catechist to help you along on the day. But then you also have the rest of your life to get good at this. So this is your first Holy Communion, not your last.
Where will I sit or do things like standing or kneeling?
Well, where you sit will depend probably on where you receive your First Holy Communion, what they do in that church. But where you stand and when you kneel, in the usual parts of the Mass. And this is why one of those ways of preparing for First Holy Communion, coming to Mass, is really important. So we get used to when we stand and when we kneel, so that we know how to do that on the day.
And what should I do after I've received my first Holy Communion?
I think there's two really important things we should do after receiving First Holy Communion, or receiving communion at any time. The first is to pray. This is a really close moment with Jesus, and so it's a beautiful time to pray to him. The second one, we should live that little bit more like Jesus would want us to. These are two things we should do after receiving First Holy Communion. We should pray and we should love.
So, what other sacraments do I receive before my first Holy Communion?
Well, the first one we receive is baptism, right? That first sacrament. And then before our first Holy Communion, we also receive the sacrament of penance, or reconciliation or confession. So we receive these two sacraments before First Holy Communion.
My dad told me that Jesus is present at church. Is that true?
You bet it is. The remaining hosts from Mass, those ones that we haven't consumed at Mass, they go into a special box in the church, or what's called a tabernacle. And you may have seen it. It usually has a little red light next to it in the church. So that tells us that Jesus is there in that tabernacle, there waiting for us to talk to him, to listen to him, and to be with him. So yes, he is definitely present in the church.
So it always has the red light next to it, or only sometimes?
When he's there in the tabernacle, when the hosts are placed in the tabernacle, the red light's on.
Why do we genuflect in church?
Well, Jesus is present in the church, right? We spoke about how Jesus is present in the church, and Jesus is also our king. And a common way to honour kings is to genuflect, or to go down. And we see this in the Gospels. A lot of people fall down at the feet of Jesus. And this is to recognise that he is our king. So that's why we genuflect when we go into the church, because our king, Jesus, is really there.
What happens after my first Holy Communion? Also, when is the next time I can receive it?
Well, remember, we call this our first Holy Communion, not our last Holy Communion, and not our only Holy Communion. So your first Holy Communion is the first time that you receive Jesus, but you can receive him for the rest of your life. Definitely every Sunday, but even some people receive Jesus every day when they come to Mass. So when we receive First Holy Communion for the first time, that is the first time, but it's the first of many. So after First Holy Communion, we come back to Mass and receive him again and again.
Thank you, Father, for answering all our questions about Holy Communion.
You're welcome.
Wow, I learned so much today, and I hope you did too. Thanks for joining me as we learned about our first Holy Communion. Bye!